For 4 years, the Trump administration targeted undocumented immigrants, undoing protections and implementing travel bans. But just hours after taking office on Wednesday, President Biden took action, halting progress on the wall and dismantling a number of President Trump's immigration policies.
Hi, Leon. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us so we can have a conversation about where we are on immigration and refugee policy at the cusp of this new administration. I'm Melanie Nezer. I'm the Senior Vice President for Public Affairs at HIAS. I have been at HIAS for 18 years now and have a background in immigration law and policy. You are a HIAS board member, and that's one of the reasons why we're sitting down with you. But you bring a lot to this role on the HIAS board. What led you here and why you care about these issues?
So my path to the HIAS board begins really in the late 1930s. My family are Sephardic Jews from Turkey, and we're all assisted by HIAS in resettling in the U.S. And so when I, many decades later, became director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, the Federal Immigration Service, I learned that, in fact, my agency collaborated with HIAS, which felt to me like I had come sort of full circle.
We know that the resettlement numbers have dropped dramatically during the last administration to levels that we've never seen before. Normally, the historical average refugee admissions number has been 90,000, and it's now down at 15,000. Is it just about the numbers, or is there more that has to be done to restore resettlement?
Yeah, let's start with what it takes to restart resettlement. President Trump had so significantly reduced refugee admissions, a lot of the capacity to screen refugees was significantly degraded. The agency has done very little to replenish its ranks, to train officers. So that process of onboarding, training, briefing, deployment is now going to have to be revived. HIAS is one among several agencies in the U.S. that have been in the work of resettling refugees for decades. Those agencies have done everything they could to preserve their capacity during the Trump years, working with people on housing and finding jobs and education, healthcare. And so all of that capacity is going to need to be remobilized in order to resettle refugees. I'm confident that it can be done, but what should not be minimized is both the financial and human investment that's going to need to be made, both within government and outside of government.
What do you expect the Biden administration to do to reverse some of the policies that have been put in place over the last 4 years, and even beyond that?
So first, we are going to see the administration saying something about course correcting at the southern border. And at some point, we're going to see some real reversal of the migrant protection protocols, which instead of allowing people into the U.S., required them to stay in Mexico on the other side of the border. This has created a very difficult situation for those migrants who are at risk of criminal activity, extortion, theft, sexual assault. We're going to see a correction of the standards for asylum, but also we're going to see a focus on creating meaningful paths, meaningful legal paths that don't involve the very risky trip from the Northern Triangle to the U.S. border to seek humanitarian relief. And in particular, one of the things that we're going to be seeing probably very soon from the Biden administration is the reactivation of what was called the Central American Minors Program, which basically created a mechanism for minors and their family members to seek refugee status in the U.S. And then the other thing, and I commend the Biden administration for having come out with this early, is a focus on conditions in the countries from which the migrants are coming. At the end of the day, unless we, together with partners in the hemisphere and throughout the world, address the issues that are driving those individuals to migrate, the need to migrate will persist.
Right. So it seems like what you're saying is the idea is to invest in and stabilize those countries in the region that are sending so many migrants and refugees because people can't remain safely in these countries, but also to have a system recognizing that there will always be refugees, there always have been refugees, that we have international and U.S. laws that protect asylum seekers, and that we have to have policies that are fair and humane that allow people to seek asylum. Is that fair?
You've said it exactly. This is one of those things that's not going to be able to be reversed in a day.
Right, and it's also going to take some really strong leadership, right? And we're very fortunate that Ali Mayorkas was confirmed as the DHS secretary. Can you talk a little bit about him?
Ali Mayorkas is somebody that I've known for, at this point, close to 20 years. He comes to the job with a deep understanding of how the department works, of all its many mission sets, including, of course, the role that it plays in both the refugee and asylum processes. He is the first immigrant and the first refugee to serve as the Secretary of Homeland Security.
So, Leon, I've been asking you a lot of legal questions, but let's talk a little bit about why does the U.S. even have a refugee program?
The modern refugee program was born in the aftermath of World War II and the Holocaust. A large number of countries in the 1950s signed on to what was called the Geneva Convention for Refugees, making commitments to build into their own legal systems provisions in order to absorb refugees from other countries. That same treaty also recognized the right to asylum. And the only difference really from a legal perspective between asylum and refugee status is that a person claiming asylum is already in the country from whose government they are requesting asylum.
You know, I think there's also an argument sometimes you hear, well, why don't we help people at home? Why are we helping people overseas? Why do resettlement?
First of all, we are a nation of immigrants. Our success as a country is precisely because we have taken the talent and energy of the whole world and invited it here. That is part of the engine of our prosperity as a country. But finally, we are a believing, values-based nation. And if we are to be a believing, values-based nation, then part of that means extending our hand to others wherever they are.
You know, what you said made me think about this misconception that I know you've heard and I've heard, and that people are not waiting in line. And we know the fact is that there's no line. We have no formal way for people to access resettlement and access asylum and access other types of protection that they need. And what you're talking about is actually opening some of those pathways.
A lot of the system that we're talking about was really built in the 1960s, but the world's become infinitely more complicated. We're actually at 80 million refugees as we speak now in 2021. Our refugee system needs to be built to that reality. There is no line because the line we built is a line that is irrelevant in many respects to where we really are as a globe and where we are as a country.
So, Leon, we have a new administration. It seems like a new day for immigration and refugee policy. Does that mean we can all just breathe easy, or does that mean there's more work to be done?
No, to the contrary, actually, there's a lot more work to be done. There are, the government is only part of the worldwide response to the suffering of refugees. We're going to need to support them both in the specific work that we're going to do as a resettlement agency, but also to the extent that we at HIAS need to continue being that voice loud and strong, and to let our government know that we support them in these efforts, and also that we expect them to deliver on their promises. That's not something we can take our eye off.
Do you have hope for the future in terms of our asylum system, in terms of our refugee program, and our broader immigration policies?
I do have hope. I think that I'm seeing many things in our country that show that we've woken up and that we are really ready to turn to that part of ourselves that views the U.S. As a humane nation, as a beacon, that looks at that part of and focuses on that part of its value system, that commands us to help others, to quote, welcome the stranger, instead of demagoguing these issues, and in particular demagoguing these issues based on fear and xenophobia.
Leon, it was so great talking to you today. This, I think, will be very informative to a lot of people who are watching.
Thank you. I am so grateful and so proud of the work that you all do.